Welcome back to Reliable Sources. I'm Brian Stelter. If you've had trouble keeping up with all of the NSA surveillance news this summer, don't worry, you are not alone. Since Memorial Day, there have been new revelations every single week about America's pervasive phone and internet surveillance programs, all thanks to Edward Snowden, who provided documents to the Guardian columnist Glenn Greenwald. The latest on Saturday came from the German newspaper Der Spiegel. The documents apparently show that the NSA hacked into systems belonging to the Arab news broadcaster Al Jazeera. This has been the media story of the summer. So as fall approaches, does the reporter who broke the story have more revelations to come? He joins me now from Rio de Janeiro. Glenn, thanks for being here. In these last 3 months, what have you personally learned from all of these disclosures?
Well, I think the main point is that the thing people most did not know is just how limitless the NSA's goals are when it comes to spying. What they're really doing is creating a spying system that literally has as its goal the elimination of privacy worldwide. The motto of General Alexander, who runs the NSA, which was pioneered in Iraq but then moved to American soil, is collect it all. In other words, every form of electronic communication that human beings have with one another should be collected, stored, monitored, and analyzed by the NSA. And that's a very extraordinary thing to happen in a democracy with no public debate and no public knowledge. And I think that's why the story has resonated the way it has.
When I read about a week ago in the Wall Street Journal that some NSA employees have been spying on their either lovers or ex-lovers, and then NSA found out because it was self-reported later by those same employees, I wondered, how many more of these sorts of stories are we going to see? And you probably know the answer to that better than I do. Are we going to continue to see a drip, drip, drip of these new revelations?
Well, I think the critical thing to realize here is that if you look at what the NSA is saying about what Mr. Snowden did, they're saying that they still have no idea what it is that he took. They have no idea what it is that he even did, which shows just how poor their system really is. And at the same time, they're building this enormous spying system that allows all kinds of abuse, which means they can't even keep track of what their own employees and contractors are doing with this incredibly invasive information. As you said, the reports about the illegality and the abuse of spying have been things that have been self-reported. So how much abuse is there that they personally either haven't detected or haven't reported? And I think a lot of the stories over the next 2 months are going to focus on exactly that question, just how much abuse is there in this system.
You and your partner, David Miranda, seem to have come under government scrutiny. Last month, David was stopped at an airport in Britain for 9 hours. He was held by the authorities. Do you worry that your movements, your travel would be restricted in the future? And is that going to in any way inhibit your reporting?
Well, Thomas Jefferson warned 250 years ago that those who most fear investigations of their actions are always the first to attack a free press. And obviously the idea of trying to criminalize investigative journalism, the idea that if you have classified information that you're responsibly reporting on, that means you can be detained under terrorism statutes or even declared a criminal, is exactly what Jefferson was warning about. So of course the US and the UK governments are furious, not that we're exposing things that harm national security, because we haven't, that we're exposing things that harm their political interest and their credibility. And so, of course, when the world's most powerful governments start attacking you, start targeting you and your family members, start making threats, it's something that you take into consideration. But as I've said from the beginning, it will never, ever deter us from continuing to report. We're going to report every last document that we have that ought to be in the public domain.
You continue to get criticized from people, including David Frum. Let me show his tweet. From people who say that you're not a journalist. He wrote earlier this week, there's a word for delivering classified national security documents to an unfriendly foreign government, and that word is not journalism. What do you make of people who say you're not a journalist, you're an advocate? What do you make of this idea of journalist on journalist warfare, as David Carr wrote about in the New York Times last week?
Yeah, I mean, one of the odd things about American political elites like David Frum is that there's no accountability or consequences ever paid. David Frum authored extraordinarily destructive lies that led to the war in Iraq when he worked for President Bush, and yet holds forth on who is and is not a journalist. It's one of the real oddities of American political discourse. But what I would say on the broader question of journalism is, to me, what journalism is about is providing an adversarial force against those who wield the greatest power, to shine light on what it is that they're doing, to inform people in democracies about what political leaders are doing in the dark, and everything that we've done and will continue to do on this NSA story has been to inform people about what those in power are doing. And obviously people appreciate it, as you see in the massive shifts of public opinion about how they think about surveillance, about the reforms in Congress. That's what journalism is about, not serving as a servant to those in power, but as a check against them.
I was really struck to your point about public opinion, about what you said to truthout.org recently in an interview. They asked you about the world's reactions to these revelations, and you said it exceeded your wildest dreams. What did you expect people to do, and how did you expect people to react 3 months ago when you started publishing these stories?
Well, I've been writing about surveillance issues in the NSA for a long time, ever since 2005, when it was revealed that the Bush administration was spying on Americans without warrants. And sometimes these issues can be complicated. Sometimes Americans think that, well, there's probably good reason why my privacy is being invaded. And so sometimes these stories don't resonate. And as you just suggested, not only has it resonated incredibly in the United States, but around the world. I mean, there's huge debates taking place for the first time about the value of privacy and internet freedom and the dangers of the U.S. surveillance state here in Brazil and in Latin America, in Europe, in Asia, all throughout the world. And I think the reason for it is that people understand that we're at this crossroads where the internet can either be what it was always intended to be, which was an incredible weapon of democratization and liberation and strengthening those who are working against those in power, or alternatively it can be history's worst instrument of control. And if we allow the government to use the internet to destroy privacy, to monitor everything that we're doing, it really radically changes our relationship to the governments around the world and the kind of life that we can live. And I think that's why the debate has been as intense and as global as it's been.
And exceeded your wildest dreams, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we got these documents, we knew that there were some very significant revelations, but you never know how people are going to react. And I think the other issue about it is that when you look at what the NSA is doing with corporations like Facebook and Google and Microsoft, communications are now completely global. The internet that we use, the companies through which we communicate are completely global in nature. And so when privacy is destroyed for Americans, it's really destroyed for people around the world. And the internet, the ability to communicate with privacy, has been crucial to the Arab Spring, to working against oppressive governments. And so, although it does exceed my wildest expectations that I had when I began, I now have had some time to think about why it has resonated so globally, and I think that's the reason.
And I know you're working on a book. It's going to come out next year. It sounds like that's not taking away from your reporting for The Guardian, though. You are continuing to work on leak stories. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, The Guardian, as you know, Brian, has partnered with the New York Times on certain documents relating to the GCHQ, the British intelligence service. There should be some very significant articles about that. We are continuing to work on very significant articles about what the NSA is doing to the American people that I think Americans will continue to be shocked by. We're working on stories in Germany. There's going to be an enormous revelation tonight in Brazil about NSA spying on Latin America that I think will shock lots of people around the world. So there still are very significant revelations to come, thanks to Edward Snowden.
That was quite a way of saying stand by for news. Glenn, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brian.